Well, welcome back to Pirate Solutions Forestry. My name's Bill, and we are not at the sawmill. We're in the joinery shop, porting the MS460 for Ralph Alfieri. And I think today is going to be a little bit shorter video. We're basically trying to get this job buttoned up while we're waiting on the new rings for this cylinder. And I think looking at it, we've only got one, two, three. I think we got four things to do today. So this should be a little bit shorter video. And I want to clarify a little bit of some of the things that we were talking about yesterday while I'm going through this, because one of them is directly going to relate to transfers and blowdown. And I was watching back my video from last night, and I kind of disagreed with a couple of things that I said. There's a real debate on blowdown transfers, transfer heights, and port theory. I think the school of thought in the builder world, people that want to get their transfers higher, and we have got our transfers higher because we cut the base of the saw, but people that want to get their transfers higher versus people that say that's bad. Those two schools of thought all revolve around crankcase pressure. So what happens in the cylinder is as this piston's coming down, while those transfers are blocked, they're still covered up completely. You're building crankcase pressure because the piston, kind of like a pump, is pushing down into the crankcase. It's got charge in there and it's pressurizing the charge. So as soon as the piston gets past and those transfer ports start to open, and I'll show you that in a second, that pressure shoves all of what's below this piston in the crankcase of the saw through the transfers back up into the top end. And the debate is around the pressure that it takes to do that. The lower the transfers, the higher the pressure, because the longer the cylinder, the piston's going down, creating more pressure down there to shove it up in the top. And the other side of the debate is what happens when your piston comes up to the top and you get an explosion up here. That explosion from your spark plug in the mix causes the piston to start going down. And then all of a sudden your piston passes the exhaust and your exhaust starts to expel out through here. At that point, as it's building pressure on the way down, it's slowing the piston down. So I think that's where we come up with this. The higher those transfers are, and it's very, very small number, because if you start multiplying 13,000 or divide 13,000 times 60, 13,000 RPMs a minute, divide that by 60, and you'll know how many times that piston's going up and down a second, and it's a lot. It's over 200. I could do the math, but it's over 200 times a second. So all these things are happening really, really fast. But I think that the guys that are in favor of raising the transfers slightly and shortening your blowdown number are lessening the pressure under the piston to make it be able to rev faster. And then the guys on the other side of the argument are going to argue just the opposite. So it's somewhat of a debate. All I know is that people that make their money doing this, that pump out ported saws, that give me numbers to port to, I try to mimic what they tell me, and I try to understand it in my mind, even though I study all this stuff a little bit. And we were talking about charge size and things like that last night, and I think it was a poor way to put it. What happens in this cylinder when you get that spark at the top and it goes boom and it goes down, you have positive pressure in the top of the cylinder. That positive, you need that positive pressure because number one, it creates mechanical shove down to the piston to keep it going up and down. but also that positive pressure forces the spent mixture, the spent charge, to flush out the exhaust. And then as the piston's going down, it's creating positive pressure down here, trying to shove a new charge up into the cylinder top through the transfers. There is a pressure that it won't allow that charge to come in. And I think it's somewhere around 5 PSI or something like that. So until you have less than 5 PSI, so all that charge goes out and there's less than 5 PSI in the top, that charge that's coming up through the transfers won't release into the top of the cylinder. So there's a balancing act there of how that happens. And then also the other part of that is in that blowdown number, once your piston gets above the transfers and blocks off an exit for any of that charge to go out, the only other exit is the exhaust. And the smaller that number is, in other words, the higher those transfers are, the smaller that blowdown number is, the less time that your good charge has to exit out the exhaust instead of get. And then once the piston gets past the top of the exhaust, then you're into compression. Also, another thing we talked about was never raising that exhaust ceiling as a good rule of thumb. One reason that you don't want to do that is you're essentially reducing the size of your engine. So you're reducing the size of your compressed charge, your compressible combustion chamber in the top if you raise that. So never a good idea. We haven't now, guys that do this for a living and go crazy at it, what they will do, instead of cutting 15 off the base like we did, they'll cut like 40 off the base, and they will take a mandrel with cutters on it and cut the combustion chamber deeper to increase the size above the exhaust of compressible area. That's a little bit out of our league. We can do it somewhat, but on the realm of thousandths of an inch, and not like they can. They can take 20 thousandths out of. They could take 40 off the base and 20 out of the combustion chamber. We could do it with a boring bar on the lathe. We'd have to come up with a setup to hold this and be able to indicate it so that we were very, very concentric. But without getting into modifying the combustion chamber, we are limited by the numbers that the guys that I follow. To give you an idea where the people, the lines they fall on, like Iron Horse, Harvey, he's on the lower transfer side. He likes the lower transfers, more pressure in the bottom, higher charge pulse going into the top. And then most of the guys that I follow are on we could have the cool little 90-degree tools, and we're going to bring those transfers up. And some of that's a combination of bringing up the combustion chamber as well. However, want to correct that a little bit, but what we're going to do is we're going to get into the 4 things that we have to do today. Number 1, we are going to modify our lower transfers here a little bit. I'll show you that. We're going to port them, so to speak, but there is a little bit of an inherent problem with the lower transfer and getting the charge to go up into the top, and we're going to try to fix that. Also, we are going to take our heat shield and gasket, and we are going to bolt them onto the cylinder, and we're going to port match them from our new exhaust size. And then we will eventually do that to the muffler as well. But the muffler, we have to take the baffle out of it. So that's going to be part of today. And what else? There's one more thing. We have to do that. I think that's it. And basically all that's doing is that's getting this saw ready to go back together when the rings show up, and hopefully tomorrow, and then we can put the saw back together. So final porting on the jug, match the heat shield, get the baffle out of the exhaust on the drill press over here, and match the exhaust to the heat shield so that when that exhaust gas goes out, there's nothing there to stop it from going into the muffler. So I have to take you over to the saw because it's over on my sharpening bench. This is my sharpening bench here. And if you look inside this crankcase, what we have is we have some sort of weird stuffer thing here. And what this does is it directs the charge coming in through the intake. If you look at your intake there, your charge is going in through there, be on the saw like this. And it goes down through here, rotates around and comes up through that hole right there and goes into this. Well, the only thing, if you look at this hole is the same shape as that, but there's nothing here. So as that charge comes up, it's running into this flat spot. Now, the piston is coming down below this. You have to understand this is upside down like that. So the piston skirt, which would be the other side of this on the other side, is going down in here, and it kind of creates a wall. So as the charge is coming up through that hole, if you can imagine, the piston's in here, so the skirt's here, so there's a wall. The charge is coming up, and there's a big flat spot right here. So what I want to do is that charge has to go up, and it's going to hit that, and that's going to cause turbulence. So what we're going to do is we're going to thin this way down to a much thinner edge so that the charge has a less of a hard time, doesn't run into this at all, to go up into the transfers. And it goes up through that hole and then out through the transfers that you can see up there in the saw onto the top of the piston. One through that side and then the other side. There are two transfers on the top, primary and a secondary. Primary and a secondary. One goes that way, one goes that way. So we want to get rid of this little roadblock right here, make it a little bit more of a knife's edge. But we want to keep some thickness to it too, so that we don't make it brittle, so that as the piston skirt would wear it away. So that's what we're going to do first. Then, after we port that out, we're going to come over here and we're going to drill out all our little spot welds. There are 6 of them holding this baffle in. And I can tell you firsthand, taking that baffle out makes a big difference in a saw. So we're going to get that out. And then we are going to match that hole to that hole after we port matched that to our exhaust. So we're going to get a little bit of oil on our cutter here so she doesn't load up so fast. Flip this thing on. What I'm going to do is rough that out quick. Get this rusting. Now they already have a bevel on here, so they know that this is the thing. They're just trying to keep a lot of support for the piston, and we want to keep that support too. So we're not going to make this thing come down to a pencil thin wall here. All we're going to do is try to take the flat off and keep its thickness. So I'm starting my bevel. Once I get rid of the wall, I'm in the flat spot, and then I'll try to blend it in. I kind of got my flat spot gone now. except for here maybe. Now we're going to try to make this thinner and blend it. Pretty close. I got rid of the flat spot. It's a nice shape. I'm going to take out a little bit in the middle here. Try to make this a little less fat. Looks pretty good. I think I'm just going to try to, I don't want to thin this wall down too much, but I want to maybe take a little more out of there. I can still see a little bit of a dip over. And just a little bit on this side. All right, I'll give you a look at that, show you what it looks like. So now there's no flat spot here anymore. It's not gonna show up really good on camera, but there's no flat spot here anymore. It bevels in, and I removed anything that was in the way of the charge going down into the transfers. I don't want to change the shape of this here because it matches the case. Now you could go ahead and grind on the case, but I don't see any reason for that. We just took off a lip here and a hindrance so that the piston wall is going to be right there. And now as the charge goes, it's got a smooth area to go into both. So that one's pretty much done. and we are going to move on. Let's do the intake horn next. Okay, I take it back. I looked at the intake horn, and there's no reason to touch it. It's really smooth. There's nothing in the way. What we're going to do here is I just bolted this on here, snug this one down, and we are going to port match this hole with what's inside. There's obviously, we took off a bunch here, a bunch on the bottom, and a bunch on the side. Nothing on the top, so the top's pretty smooth. But we're just going to make it so that this hole matches our exit hole. And we're going to do that again with the carbide bit here. Okay, so now we have matched our gasket and our heat shield to our exit port on the exhaust, and you can put your finger in there and feel it. Anything that you feel that's catching needs to come out, and this is perfect right now. One thing you do want to do on these, especially if you just have a gasket, is you want to make a mark on them, because now they are unidirectional. They only go in technically one way. What I typically do is I'll put a dot on the gasket, and we know the heat shield can only go in one way, but I'll put a dot on that too. That dot means that's the top, and then it goes towards the muffler. Just something that simple. Because if you do port match it, just a gasket, if you don't have this heat shield, or sometimes the heat shield can be put in either way, and your gasket can go in a multitude of different ways, that just tells me that that goes towards the muffler, and that's the top, and that goes towards the muffler, and that's the top. This heat shield can only go on this particular cylinder one way. It's got an actual little detent in the top. I don't know if you can see that little, right above my dot, there's a hole there that fits into a little slot on the top, and this has a little spot that sits against a support over here on the side. So this is done, and now what we got to do is we got to pull out the baffle out of the muffler, and then we'll match the muffler to this. All right, so if you look down where this baffle's attached, you see those two little spot welds right there. There are two on the side, on the right side there, and there are two on the left side. One of them is obscured by carbon. We are going to try to drill those out. Basically, all we do is just drill down through them, and you're not going to want to go all the way through the muffler. Eventually, you'll make them weak enough, so we should be able to just knock this out with a punch. I'll let you watch. This isn't going to be super exciting, or unless something bad happens. This thing should just punch out of here. I think we've taken enough out of it. Let's see what happened. Okay, it broke free. There are a couple more on the top, but they should just break right off. Let's see if we can punch on a little bit harder and a little bit higher, and it should come out. Let me give you a look at what's going on here. So we got the baffles all pulled out, but there is a weld up in the top up in there that I would not have been able to drill out anyway. It's a teeny little one. You can see where it's pulling right here, one of them, and there's another one right there. We could just drill through this muffler and make a couple little crackle holes, but I think I can still get it out of there. Typically, when it's only holding on by that, they would just rip out. And maybe it will if I can get a pair of pliers on it. Okay, so I have some pliers on the part that tore away here. We'll see if we can get it bending. Oh, there it goes. Oh man, come on, give up the ghost, dude. It's like just about ready to come out. Gosh, come on. Come on. Hey, baffle out. Oh, there were actually 4 welds up in the top there. It's going to create a little cherry bomb effect. All right, so you can see baffles out. See the welds that I drilled out. You can see the welds I didn't drill out where the holes are, which is good. Now you get a little extra port there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bolt, or we're going to put that heat shield on the back side of this, and we will scribe what needs to come out of here, and then we'll take that out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scribe on here. Now you could just go big with this, but a lot of times sometimes there's no room to go big. A little teeny bit on the top. Just drawing it with a Sharpie. Just trying to get rid of any restrictions. And of course, I did that wrong, didn't I? See how that dot goes like this. And that could make a difference, guys. So I'm going to redo that. No, it lines up pretty good. Lines up perfect. Just want to make sure that we keep the bolt holes. We don't get too close to the bolt holes. So, this, the place where the seal on the gasket, still kind of intact. This actually goes on there like this. And my lines look great. So if you see there's a square line all the way around, that's not my line. That is where the gasket seats. I can see my line, and we're going to go to grinding on it. Time! All right. We have all our components done. I got to do a bunch of cleanup. That's what it looked like at final. So I got metal all over me. I got 2 slivers in my fingers. Got to go ahead and wash my hands, get those out. And we're on weight to get the rings. So I can do some cleanup. Get all my tools put away. I can do away with all the Dremel tools and all the bits and everything. I can make an inventory of bits I need to reorder. And get my workbench set up for when those rings show up to put this thing back together. Now, the next video, if I don't video all of the, I'll video for sure putting the jug on. All right, so you can see a ring compressor and if I screw up and stuff like that. How to get jug on. Then I think I'll stop and I'll put the rest of the saw together. I'll start you guys back up when I get a bar on it, the bar and chain they sent with it. I'll make sure that's sharp. And we should be able to go out and do some cuts with it, maybe mess around with the RPMs a little bit, because it's going to be a significant improvement. This saw is not, all right, let's start over. We got to stop using terms like significant improvement. This is not the same saw it was that they brought to me. Oh, and we got to hope that the coil wire is okay. This is not the same saw that they brought to me. This saw now is completely different. It's going to be in a different stratosphere from a compression standpoint. We've solved a bunch of flow problems inside the cylinder. It's got no baffle in the muffler. It's port matched out the exhaust. We took care of, like I said, the two little port problems with the lip in the intake and that flat spot going into the lower transfers. We increased the duration of the intake to 80. This is not the same saw. This is a different saw. His guys have never run this saw. Okay, they say, oh, I ran that saw before. No, you ran a different saw before. You ran a bone stock MS460. Now, guys, for those of you who hung on this long, I want to get this out of the way. I am not a porting expert by any means. Okay, the Jason Egans of the world and these guys are saw porters. That's what they do. Maybe even Walter Glover. I'll add Walter Glover to the list. I mean, Walter Glover would have never cut the base. He would just remove the gasket. But Walter Glover might put boost ports and stuff like that in there. You know, Mastermind. Those guys are saw porters. They build saws for people for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. That's not me. I learn from them. And when I have a question, I call them up and ask them. And they give me answers as to why I do what I do. As far as grinding goes, I kind of learn every time a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. When I first started porting, I finished better because I thought it made a difference. So I might spend hours on that exhaust, getting it to look like a mirror and getting all my lines exactly perfect and all my radius is the same. I had a little, tool that ground every radius so they were all exactly the same. And on the exit side of my ports, the stuff to make them look pretty. And I understand now that symmetry and the numbers are so much more important. Size is not always the best thing. If you take the inside of this exhaust port right here, where it goes into the cylinder, and you make that bigger, you can wreck the saw. If you widen the ears on the intake a little too much and get into your windows of your piston, you can really hurt this saw. There are a lot of things that you can do to mess it up. Simple is always better. You want to think with your fingers. Put your finger in the port. You can feel bumps. You can feel things. Take the bumps out. Once the bumps are out, intake side you can make the intake side rough. You don't need to smooth it out. Smooth out the exhaust, but it doesn't need to be like a mirror. If you see somebody post their pictures where, they have this perfect square and they got the light shined in there and it's like a mirror and all, that's great. Okay. You're not going to find guys making a living porting doing that. They just won't. Okay. They're not going to spend 3 hours polishing an exhaust to post a picture of the exhaust on the internet. They're going to make the exhaust the way it works good. That's all they care about. All they care about is their numbers and what they've learned and making the saw that way. I was really apprehensive to cutting the base of the cylinder in the beginning. I was kind of like Walter Glover, where I just said, well, why don't I just delete the gasket? Well, one reason is that, if you watch Tree Monkey do saws, one reason is that they'll do a jug on and off and on and off. They'll try it, they'll change it. And the only way to do that is with a gasket. You're not gluing that thing down with 1184, pulling it off, scraping it all off, taking an hour and a half to clean up the cylinder base to make a change to it. And if you want to make a change to it, the only way to do it is to have a gasket. It's just the correct way to do it. So I do try to cut the base when I think it will help the saw. I'm not porting saws for customers every day, but when I have a good customer and a good friend who does a lot of shit for me, brings me a saw, when he gets it back, I don't want him to recognize it. So that's what's going to happen here. So I'm going to get a whole bunch of crap cleaned up and get my whole place rearranged. And hopefully it rains today. Please, Lord, let it rain today. It's not raining right now. Could it be raining? Oh, I'm seeing drops. Oh my God. We get the hurricane going past us tomorrow afternoon. It's going to get close, but only close enough to cause gale warnings for us. If I get my rings tomorrow, we'll put the saw together tomorrow. And believe me, guys, this is a different animal. I think I'm going to take some of that bicycle tape and wrap the handle for him too, so it looks cool. Because they're going to be like, yeah, I want to grab the cool saw instead of saying, oh, it's too heavy. It hurt my arm. But thanks for coming along. I know yesterday's video was a long video. I know I've been rambling on. I always think of things and I'm trying to give you as much information as I can. I hope you find this entertaining. I think the only people that are going to hang on to the end are people that find this entertaining or informative. So till tomorrow, Power Solutions out.